Good afternoon. Welcome to the world's greatest Rotary Club. Happy Easter. Happy Passover to all of you. I hope you've enjoyed a wonderful weekend at this very holy time of year for so many of our faith traditions. Jonathan Reckford has our invocation this morning and will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. And then Gray is going to kindly hobble up and lead us in the singing of the national anthem.
Good afternoon. It's still such a novel joy to see real live people in 3D, so it is I'm honored to be with you all. And what a time to celebrate. As President Catherine said, it's been an important weekend for multiple faiths. The Easter message of hope feels so very real as I look at all of God's blessings. And here in Georgia, we are surrounded by flowering trees, beautiful flowers and green leaves and shoots coming up from branches that have been bare for months. And it feels like such a sense of new life as we emerge slowly from this long COVID winter. Last week, after a 3-year pause, we hosted 2,400 of our Habitat leaders from around the country and world here in Atlanta. And it was a humbling time to spend time with many of our national directors and talking to our team from Ethiopia, who have been living through a civil war along with COVID and many other challenges and still persisting, from Haiti, where gangs rule the roads and they have a failed government and a constant fear of kidnapping along with COVID, to Romania, where despite the very real fear that the tanks would be rolling back into Romania again from Russia, our team were among the first at the border to welcome refugees and help them find lodging. It greatly inspired me and put some of the inconveniences that have frustrated me quickly back into perspective. It's been a dark time in our world, even before a tragic and senseless war. Then had such a powerful weekend, celebrating first a Seder service to mark the beginning of Passover with dear friends on Friday night. And I was struck by a closing reading at the Seder. The redemption is not yet complete. The fourth cup recalls us to our covenant with the Eternal One, to the tasks that still await us as a people called to the service of God, to a great purpose for which the people of Israel lives, the preservation and affirmation of hope. Then yesterday we celebrated Easter, the holiest day of the year for Christians. Often we try to understand the mystery of Easter through images of light. God has been and continues to be at work among those who suffer in the darkness. May we proclaim like the psalmist, "Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light." Followers of Jesus, as well as those who do not celebrate Easter, can imagine the joy of being drawn out of the darkness. The light that each of you shine into the world makes such a difference. For Christians, we have to walk through the pain of the crucifixion before we can fully experience the resurrection. As surprising as it seems, God's preferred method of spreading his love in our world is you and me. Would you pray with me as I share this ancient benediction? Disturb us, O Lord, when we are too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dream too little, because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, O Lord, when with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the water of life. When having fallen in love with time, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of heaven to grow dim. Stir us, O Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture into wider seas where storms show thy mastery, where losing sight of land we shall find the stars. In the name of him who pushed back the horizons of our hopes and invited the brave to follow. And all God's people said, Amen. Would you join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in our national anthem.
the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's bright glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you so much for joining us, especially during this busy holiday time as we continue our supply chain series. Quick look ahead at today's program. Following our announcements and the introduction of new member Mark Adams, we are pleased to hear from our GRSP student, Sagar Badvi, who will share a report on his time with us and some reflections on Gen Z. And then after that, we're pleased to welcome PJ Bain of Prime Revenue and Gardner Gerard of TTV Capital for a fascinating program about the role of fintech in supply chain finance. A warm welcome to all of our guests this morning or this afternoon. If you could please stand when I call your name and remain standing, we'd love to welcome all of you at the end with a round of applause. First, we have a visiting Rotarian, Michael Stimpert, who is our GRSP trustee and also a member of the Buckhead Club. Also, two guests of PJ Bain, Nathan Feather and David Quillian. Two guests of Adrian Cronier, Bradley Martin and Maggie Sims. And finally, guest of Simon Malco, David Calhoun. Welcome to all of you. A few club announcements. I will start with a special word for our past president, Dave Moody, who just had his first grandchild. Where is Dave? I know I just saw him. There he is. Dave, boy or girl?
Boy, and I'm having my lunch and dinner here because my wife is staying with my daughter. So
There you go. Wonderful. Congratulations. So exciting. Thanks to most all of you who have paid your dues on time. I know we do have a few stragglers who are past due. If you will please do your part to catch up on that, we sure do appreciate it. I'd hate to have to send out our sergeant at arms to come after you. Also, on the membership front, we are working hard to diversify our membership to better represent the community we serve. And as leaders, you all know that you can't manage what you can't measure. Historically, the only diversity data that we have captured on club members was white or non-white, and even that was somewhat inconsistent. In this day and age, as you can imagine, it's imperative that Atlanta's premier business and civic club be able to understand our club's diversity. So in order to do that, we'd like to ask your help. This year, along with our annual survey that was sent out to capture your member information and data for our directory, we also included a separate survey so that every member could self-identify their race and ethnicity along U.S. Census Bureau designations. As you can imagine, this is something that we should not guess about, and so if you have already filled out this survey, we certainly appreciate that. If you have not done so, we will be recirculating the survey link tomorrow so you can fill it out. I am so proud of the progress that Atlanta Rotary is making to be a more diverse club that is representative of the great city that we are a part of. And thank you so much in advance for taking just a moment to respond to the survey so that we can maintain our momentum and be a best practice organization. Yesterday, on Easter, I was pleased to pull out the AJC, and I was thrilled to find, side by side, the two headline articles, coincidentally, were about our next two program speakers, literally for the next 2 weeks. The first article described the economic impact of the billion-dollar expansion of the Georgia ports in Savannah. And yes, I'm pleased to remind all of us that the final speaker in our supply chain series next week will be none other than the CEO of the Georgia Ports Authority, Griff Lynch. And then the other article right next to that was called Mayor Embraces Peacemaker Role, talking about the fruitful first 100 days of Mayor Dickens' administration. And you will have a chance, as you know, to hear from Mayor Dickens in a conversation with Rotary the following week, May the 2nd. So I will say hats off to our Fearless Program Committee. I'm not sure if you were lucky or smart to line up so perfectly with those headlines, but we will take it either way. One more event also to mention just right around the corner. On May 9th, we will host our Rotary Spring Cocktail Reception at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. This is going to be a wonderful evening with cocktails and food and fellowship among our fellow members in the garden. Also will include a tour of the brand new origami exhibit in your ticket. This is also a member appreciation event that will not require any additional charge for you and your spouse or guests to attend. And that evening, the club will also host a new member pre-function to welcome all of our new members who've joined over the past 2 years together with their sponsors. We've had such a great response already, thrilled about that, and so if you have not already signed up, please be sure to do so using the registration link in your program email. Finally, our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to those in Ukraine. You may have seen a recent reminder that we sent out about the opportunities to support the efforts that our Rotary District is working on in Ukraine. If you're still interested in participating and contributing, please let Gina or Jim Reed know. And for those of you who have already contributed, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate your support of this important cause. I am now pleased to welcome to the podium Jerry Thomas, who will introduce new member Mark Adams.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to have the opportunity to introduce our new member, Mark Adams. I asked Mark this morning when we got here, I said, Mark, when did you graduate from high school? And he said, 1987. So that is the year I met Mark Adams. He arrived at my office as my first inroads intern, having recently graduated from Columbia High School. And he was on his way to Clemson University to study financial management. So to say I've known Mark for most of his life would be an accurate statement. He persevered the 4 years as an intern at the then CNS Bank and was promptly hired as a management trainee in our consumer banking program. After 2 years, he excelled and became a branch manager. So he was probably around 23 when he became a branch manager. He says often that I am the person I was his work mother. And it probably felt that way to Mark. Because yes, I was on him, yes, I said, what are you doing? Yes, I gave supportive and corrective coaching when needed. And that's gone on now for a lot of years, 30 plus years. Mark has excelled in every opportunity he's been afforded. He moved to our business banking unit when that was established because we hadn't had one. And I'm sorry you're going to hear me saying we when I'm talking about Bank of America, CNS. It's all we. Was there too long to not make it a we. And he moved into the business banking arena, and his leadership was very obvious, and he excelled and became a manager over in business banking. He then moved into the private bank. And it was at a time where we created a premier bank. That was before the private bank. And he moved over there as a manager. And along the way, then I think his daughter was born, Allison. And he was living in Decatur, so she's now, I think, a junior? She's a sophomore at Decatur High School. Mark waited until I retired. I think that might have been by design. After I'd come back from a world cruise, he got on my calendar, and he said, I have something I need to tell you. I've been poached. J.P. Morgan Chase came after Mark, and he had when I left, he was leading the U.S. Trust Bank for Bank of America, and he decided that he'd go try something new, and he went to J.P. Morgan Chase. And he has excelled at J.P. Morgan Chase. When I nominated him for Rotary, he was the head of, I think, the retail division. And last week, he's now moved at J.P. Morgan, and he's in the wealth management area as a region director and managing director at J.P. Morgan Chase. And we thought with Allison being 16 years old that his family was set. And lo and behold, 2 months ago, Major Christian Adams was born. So he excelled at being, a girl dad? Now he gets to be a boy dad, too. So congratulations to Mark and his wife. I tell you, I feel like when I nominated him for Rotary, I spent some time with him because he's also he's on the board at the Fox, and I had him working over at Georgia State. He is an alum. He got his MBA there, and he did go to Wharton and get a little training at Wharton Business School. But I said, okay, Mark, now it's time. So he started as the president of the Alumni Association at Georgia State. Then he moved over to the J. Mac Robinson School of Business, where he's chaired for 4 years now. For 3 years, he's been the chair of the advisory board at the J. Mac Robinson. And so as I got ready to roll off the trustee board at the Georgia State Foundation, I said, Mark, it's time. So he is a newly inducted member as a trustee at Georgia State University on the foundation board. So he loves sports. He takes coaching very well, and he makes you very proud because he does succeed. So I am proud to present on behalf of my co-sponsors, Veronica Biggins and Alan Vella, Mark Adams.
Thank you.
Mark, welcome to Rotary. So excited. This is your Rotary pin.
Thank you.
Love hearing the long story. What a wonderful friendship. Everybody needs a work mother. So excited to welcome you to the club. I can tell you're going to make us an even better club, and congratulations on the birth of your son. So
Thank you.
welcome again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Each year, it's a tradition for our club to sponsor and host a visiting college student as part of our involvement in the Georgia Rotary Student Program, especially for some of our newer members. I will mention the GRSP was founded in 1946 after World War II to bring students from war-torn Europe to the U.S. to study as a way to promote world peace and understanding. Today, that program, which is part of 3 different districts around the state of Georgia, has over 3,600 alumni. I know many of you have come to know this year's GRSP student, Sagar Badvi, who came to us from Perth, Australia. You have welcomed him into your homes. You have visited and traveled with him and seen his warm smile here at our weekly meetings. This club is full of experienced and impressive leaders, and that could easily be intimidating to a student, but Sagar came here last fall and dove in fearlessly. I know we have all enjoyed his good company, his earnestness, and his insatiable desire to learn. And he has certainly made the very most of all of the opportunities shared with him. I wanted to thank all of the many Rotary members who have spent time with Sagar to share different aspects of their career and their experiences. Also wanted to thank Gina and her team who have worked with him along the way and taken such good care of him. I know that each of you has a share in what is undoubtedly going to be an impressive career ahead for Sagar. We'd also like to hope that all of our future Rotary visiting students will be as energetic and motivated as Sagar has been in his time with us. He has certainly set a high bar. So as this year comes to a close, Sagar is here with us to share some reflections on his time with Atlanta Rotary over the past year, and also a few perspectives on the topic of Gen Z. So welcome to you, Sagar.
The silent generation, the baby boomer generation, Generation X, and even a few millennials. All of us are in this room today. And even though I can intensely pore over the history books, I cannot tell you what it felt like to experience and live through the civil rights movement, the moon landing, or the fall of the Berlin Wall. Generations exist on a continuum whereby the attitudes and behaviors of those of similar ages are influenced by shared formative experiences. They are a broad lens through which to observe societal change. However, the world now prepares to confront a new generation, my generation, Generation Z. Generation Z, comprising those born between 1996 and 2012, is vastly different from other generations, but different doesn't have to be bad. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about me and the generation I come from. I am Sagar Badvi, I'm 22, I'm of Indian heritage, but I was born in Dubai and I've lived in Australia my whole life. My international experiences, all born out of academic and leadership scholarships, have allowed me to spend a semester abroad in Sweden on a university exchange, travel throughout Europe, and spend a considerable amount of time in the Indo-Pacific. In recent years, I've visited states of the US, particularly LA for a leadership conference, and New York, where I spent 2 months during the summer of 2019. As I am left to navigate the unmapped expanse that is my future, I see commonalities between my journey and those of many others around me. As the first generation to be described as digital natives, technology and instantaneous digital connectedness are a ubiquitous part of our lives. Coupled with our ability to utilize it, my generation is better positioned to take advantage of remote work opportunities. Now, more than any other time in history, it is easier for candidates to be interviewed and as a result work for international companies. Gen Z will likely evolve from digital natives to digital nomads, attempting to travel the world while still being employed, moving to where opportunities may arise. This level of opportunity simply didn't exist in previous generations. For years, global mobility conjured up images of complex and costly relocation processes involving expatriates who were typically characterized as managers in their late 30s. Now, expats may look like a 24-year-old Georgia Tech computer science graduate. Evidently, remote and hybrid work opportunities cater to my generation's inkling towards flexible and autonomous forms of work that allow for a better work-life balance. With longer productive years, we will likely live and/or work in multiple countries across our professional careers. As we enter the workforce and technologies rapidly change, I see less value placed on salary and prestige compared to previous generations, with a greater emphasis on growth pathways to acquire new skills. Even as the war for talent rages on, the tyranny of distance that once ruled with an iron fist has dissipated. For decision makers, this apparent disruption will actually serve to benefit you, allowing the option of leveraging alternative roles, addressing key regional skill shortages in critical markets, and tapping into new talent. Staffing is now highly customizable, no longer constrained by geographic limits. The pandemic was a time machine, not sucking us back into the past, but rather catalyzing us into a future that was already on its way. I believe that the future of work will call for the return of a Renaissance figure, a person with many interests and areas of knowledge, with one of their greatest values being an effectiveness in intercultural communication. As companies evolve, merge, and internationalize, employees become geographically dispersed, and a fluency in intercultural communication becomes an irreversible necessity. Culture has a large impact on how people conduct business. Oftentimes we see individuals speaking the same mathematical languages, but those who thrive understand cultural nuances and can effectively communicate. It is ironic then that Generation Z might be able to help. For many of us, we have grown up with more global access than imaginable. The global mindset is built into our DNA. International is all we know. Combined with the burning desire and the opportunity to travel internationally earlier in life, especially through exchange programs, allows us to navigate cultural nuances, ultimately learning in an authentic way while developing our intercultural communication skills. As a result, we are not only comfortable in different physical and cultural environments, but rather have developed a genuine respect and appreciation for difference. The changing nature of the Generation Z demographic will undoubtedly affect your personal and professional relationships, and businesses that take the time to understand the characteristics of Gen Z will reap the benefits that my generation has to offer. In many ways, it is symbolic that Generation Z is named after the last letter of the alphabet, because our arrival marks the end of clearly defined roles, traditions, and the status quo. It is clear that Gen Z are rewriting the rules and following their own path. Instead of planning 3 moves ahead, they are flipping over the once carefully arranged chessboard of life and deciding to risk it all. And so am I. I cannot help but relish the unique opportunity that Rotary has provided me, a window to the world. The chance to start along my journey of becoming a global citizen is something I'm committed to maintaining. My time in the US has forced me to look introspectively and consider my professional aspirations. I've always known that my future was in the US, but now I consider it to be in Atlanta. Over the next few months, I'll remain in Atlanta while I work through the employment process in the US. But this is not a goodbye, as in the meantime, I'll still assist the club in my usual capacity. It is easy to see why I've grown fond of this city. Atlanta and its people have treated me exceptionally well, and so a huge thank you to Atlanta Rotary members from all clubs, Atlantans, and especially those who I've had a meal with or those who have hosted me. My generation may be different, but when we combine individuals across generations, cultures, and continents, we get something very special, something like the Georgia Rotary Student Program. The opportunities and experiences I've been afforded through this program, and particularly this club, have been truly extraordinary. It is undeniable that the value of this program is immense, and I believe that one of the most transformative and powerful aspects of international programs like GRSP is its power to catalyze understanding of oneself. The old adage, know thyself, is appropriate here. We become more aware of our own culture by better understanding other cultures and perspectives. And so I'd like to close with a quote from Michael Crichton that articulates this sentiment. Often I feel I go to some distant region of the world to be reminded of who I really am. There is no mystery about why this should be so. Stripped of your ordinary surroundings, your friends, your daily routines, your refrigerator full of food and your closet full of clothes, with all this taken away, you are forced into direct experience. Such direct experience inevitably makes you aware of who is having that experience. That's not always comfortable, but it is always invigorating. And what an invigorating 8 months it has been, from attending a wedding in rural Alabama, to wandering around Chicago on rainy days, and to even volunteering in Honduras. and to now contemplating a future in Atlanta. It has been nothing but invigorating. I sincerely thank you. And in typical Rotary tradition, I'd like to present President Kelly firstly a banner from my home Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of Perth, and then also as a personal gesture, just out of appreciation for this opportunity and the warmth you and all Atlanta Rotary members and Rotary members across the state have shown me, I've included an Australian flag and a bottle of Shiraz from my home state of Western Australia that I actually brought over with me 8 months ago, and it's been aging in my room ever since. So hopefully you can enjoy that. Thank you all again.
Thank you so much. Oops. We also, don't go anywhere. We also have a flag that we are sharing with Sagar, our Rotary Club of Atlanta flag, in the Rotary tradition of flag exchange. I think you can all hear just now what a bright future Sagar has ahead of him. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your warm spirit with all of our members. We wish you nothing but the very best on your path ahead. So thank you.
Very much.
Oops. So I'm now pleased to introduce fellow Rotarian Adrian Cronier, President and CEO of Ballantine. You have heard from Adrian these past several weeks in our supply chain series, and I'm now honored to welcome him back today to introduce today's featured speaker. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gardner and PJ, that's an easy act to follow. I hope you're ready for it. I can testify that Sagar is a mean squash rackets player as well. So happy you'll be staying for longer. So, now Governor Kemp has declared a state of emergency in Georgia that went into effect on Saturday. I see some of you nodding your heads. The legislation aims at easing the supply chain issues disrupting our state's economy with measures aimed at avoiding price gouging, especially on fuel, expanding the hours that truck drivers can work, and easing the size and weight limits for commercial vehicles. These guys are very prescient. Thank you, Program Committee. And we're only halfway through the supply chain series, educating ourselves on the most significant issue I regard facing the global economy over the medium term, taking advantage of Atlanta's unique vantage point. So what are some of the issues and things that we've learned about during our first two programs with Norfolk Southern and Manhattan Associates? Well, unfortunately, we've learned that these disruptions are not likely to ease anytime soon. Jeff, that has huge implications for inflation, for interest rates, and for Raphael's forecast in May. I cannot wait for that. Are we inviting the press?
You may be revising it right now.
In fact, we learned last week that the 2022 holiday season is going to be even more challenging than 2021. Inventory management and working capital requirements, something that Eddie alluded to in passing last week, is going to be absolutely key to the outlook for corporations in our region. Cash flow management is going to be key. And so I'm so excited to introduce Gardner and PJ today, who will be expanding upon our understanding of this complex issue. They are both club members, and the subject of this afternoon's panel is FinTech's role in supply chain finance and future corporate profitability. As many of you know, Gardner is the managing partner of TTV Capital, a private equity firm focused on the fintech industry that is flourishing in our city today. PJ Bain is the chief executive officer of Atlanta-based fintech leader Prime Revenue. Let me tell you just briefly about this amazing Atlanta story that is Prime Revenue. It was established in 2003 and is now the global leader in working capital and business-to-business payment solutions. More than 40,000 companies, one of your customers calling? More than 40,000 companies in 90 jurisdictions across the world leverage prime revenue solutions to connect the entire financial supply chain. Through automated digital payments, increased payment visibility, enhanced control, and improved cash flow. Prime Revenue's SurePay platform is backed by a network of over 100 funding partners supporting 30 different currencies. Their platform processes more than 130 billion in buyer-facilitated payment transactions annually to accelerate cash flow and ensure on-time payment for businesses around the world. PJ's been absolutely integral to its success. Since joining Prime Revenue in 2009, PJ has steered the company from visionary startup to its current position as a disruptor and global leader in delivering supply chain finance and working capital solutions. Under his leadership, Prime Revenue has experienced 20% plus year-on-year increases in revenue and enormous global market expansion. He is a lifelong entrepreneur and business leader that instills a performance-driven and values-based culture. Prime Revenue is regularly named a top workplace by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and was featured in the Inc. 5000's fastest-growing companies in America list for the last 9 consecutive years. PJ, as a member of this club, aspires to putting service above self. He's involved in many charitable activities. He received a Bachelor of Industrial and System Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology, where, little known fact, he was a walk-on member of the varsity football team. Let's hope they can turn around their fortunes soon. Gardner and PJ, please come on up to the stage so we can now explore how companies in Georgia and throughout the Southeast can actually leverage all this supply chain disruption as an opportunity to pursue innovation. And in particular, how does our flourishing startup community and logistical expertise position our city so well as a leader in solving supply chain challenges around the world?
I did this moderating, I don't know, a year or two ago, and I came in and Bill Todd, I think I said this even during the talk, he's like, aren't you on today? And I was like, I'm just moderating. And he's like, no, that's the most important thing. And he had me scrambling the whole for like 20 minutes before the panel because I was now under pressure. And when I walked in today, Adrian said, you need to make this fun. And so I'm thinking supply chain, finance, like how am I gonna make this fun? But I'm gonna do my best. It's kind of an interesting, like all the adjectives that were describing fintech and supply chain, like we've been a part of that for 20 years. And I promise you, nobody was ever using words like fascinating and so interesting. It was really a behind the scenes activity. But I guess I'll kick it off with probably the question that everybody is most interested in understanding, and that is, what the hell was the deal with toilet paper?
Just toilet paper. So we're going to talk about supply chain, and we start with toilet paper. So I think everybody probably is familiar with the issue with toilet paper, with milk, with gas. If we went home tonight and we turned on the weather and there was going to be a snowstorm coming in tomorrow, what's the first thing that crosses your mind? Is probably, I got to get milk, I got to get toilet paper, and I need to fill my car up with gas. And I think it's actually a good place to start the conversation around supply chain because it makes me think of two things, and it's the two sort of overarching things that are occurring in supply chain right now. The first is a dislocation of supply and demand. So supply and demand always holds true. And the first thing is, as soon as everybody sees the news report that we're going to go into a global lockdown and a global pandemic, they think, okay, I may be stuck in my house for a while. What do I need? I'm going to buy ahead on toilet paper for a few weeks. I probably need to buy Fruity Pebbles. I need to buy milk, and I need to fill my car up with gas. And that's a dislocation of supply and demand. And it has very much to do with the second aspect, I think, that's overarching what we're going through in global supply chains right now that I'll talk about in a minute. But that small increase in demand can wipe out all of the inventory that's on the shelves. The last part, everybody's seen it, right? So you have this spike in supply, and then that leads to a problem, which is really the second problem, which is, as Adrian shared, I'm an industrial engineer from Georgia Tech. Supply chain is sort of driven by industrial engineering. And the grandfather of industrial engineering is a guy named Edwards Deming. So Edwards Deming was a great engineer. He was actually asked to come by Douglas MacArthur to Japan post-World War II. And so one of the things that he did was he was instrumental in rebuilding the Japanese manufacturing economy post-World War II. And so out of that came industrial engineering practices and processes, the fundamental philosophy of how we manage supply chain today. And just-in-time inventory, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, concepts like Kanban, all of those concepts around working capital, how can we reduce the amount of supply that's in the system, because the less inventory that are tied up on balance sheets, the more cash is free to be able to drive the businesses. So when Edwards Deming sort of established the launch in the early to mid-50s, through March 13th of 2020, supply chains, people, system, and process thought about supply chains around efficiency. So we've got to be efficient, we've got to be efficient, we've got to be efficient. And what being efficient means is driving inventory out of the system. We want to reduce inventory so that the ideal situation is the pulp shows up at the toilet paper manufacturing facility, it goes right into the process, it's turned in to toilet paper, it's packaged, goes to the grocery store, and is sold right away. As efficient as possible. Turn over the inventory as many times as you can. And that was, the people were trained that way, the systems were built that way, and the processes were built around reducing the inventory in the systems as much as possible, because that's highly efficient. So what happened on March 13th, 2020, we all of a sudden realized that it's not about efficiency anymore. Now it has to be about agility and resilience. So when you have this spike in demand, and if you think about a process and a system that's operating at 98 or 99% efficiency that goes down for a week, for a month, you can't turn that system back on at 160% to make up for that demand. So for items like milk, gas, toilet paper, the fundamentals that we need to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis, you had this massive spike in demand. You have 70 years from 1955 through March 13th of 2020, where the systems are designed to deliver just in time, right on time, immediate, and you built up this immense demand that's taking a very long time to work through it.
So where are we with it now? Has there been an adjustment? I mean, if I said it back to you, it's, hey, we flushed out all the inventory in the system, it got just in time, everything was arriving right when it was needed. You get a little bit of a spike and everything falls apart. What are they doing about it now, and have you seen changes?
So the changes were very interesting. Prime Revenue is a private equity-backed business. We have 2 institutional investors that are our shareholders, along with our management team and our employees. And I remember, and I have a couple of my colleagues, our CFO and our chief legal officer are here with me today. And I think we spent probably 23 and a half hours together for about 2 or 3 months post-March of 2020. Being able to support our clients, making sure that we're going to have the liquidity to be able to operate our business. Our institutional investors have economists that are on staff, and those economists told us around March 20th, after things had shut down, they said, you need to plan on probably 3 months of no income whatsoever, no revenue. We expect that the global economy, and our business is very transactional. So Andre mentioned we process about $130 billion in payments every year. We see about $300 billion in business-to-business purchases across our platform in those 90 countries every year. And we have a transactional revenue model. So when the economy is flowing and there's lots of volume, that's good for us. We get a tiny percentage of that flow. And that stopped in March of 2020. So we were very worried. So we were very aggressive. Our clients, we were very aggressive in controlling costs, preparing for a lot of downside. We saw 2 different actions with our clients. We had clients that took a wait-and-see attitude, and we had clients that were very aggressive in thinking about what are they going to do. And if you remember back to March, April, May of 2020, no one really knew what was going to happen. It's almost humorous now when you think about it. I remember walking into a building and everybody's walking around touching the buttons in the elevators with their elbows and the things that we didn't know. We've learned so much since then. And the same is true with business. We've learned a tremendous amount about business, but we had clients that did two things. One was very aggressive, and one took a wait-and-see attitude. I'm not sure where the information's coming from. We need to balance things out. Today, the businesses that are doing very, very well are the ones that you might suspect were very aggressive in taking cost control, rethinking how they were going to deploy assets, rethinking how they were going to deploy inventory. The ones that took a wait-and-see attitude, they're struggling, and we've actually lost a lot of those customers because they're no longer in business or they've been acquired by their competitors. So that's the biggest thing that we've seen is a redeployment of your resources, your assets, and thinking about how we're going to react moving forward.
Yeah. I think I've told you this, but I have a history with prime revenue because not long after Sonny Dariso and Synovus and Tom Cousins and I saw Billy Wren gave us money, I really didn't know that much about the venture capital business when I was 29. I had a little bit of experience, but Billy Holtz took me under his wing. He was in the private equity business, among other things. He was a former Rotarian, and he was involved early days in prime revenue, and I really hadn't had any experience in trade credit either, or factoring or any of those things. And Billy invited me to come meet. I can't remember who the CEO was then, but I remember thinking that's the most complicated business I've ever listened to. I had no idea. I mean, I'm going to apologize. I'm not sure if this sounds okay. I mean, I was a smart guy, but like it has a lot of moving parts. So there's an over-under on whether or not you can get half the people in this room to understand what you do. So I'm going to give you a shot right now, and at the end we'll do a poll, and everybody raise their hands. Oh, I know, I can tell you back what they do, because it's not, buyers, sellers, receivables, payables, but please, I want to see how it's evolved in the explanation.
We've had to dumb down the explanation of business so that I can understand what we actually do. And at the end of the day, what we really do is actually fairly simple. So global trade and supply chains is all about the movement of physical goods and services. So if I'm going to manufacture a car, I've got to have the frames, I've got to have the paint, I've got to have the wheels, I've got to have the tires, I've got to have the axles, all of the different components to be able to put my car together and then sell my car into the market if I'm an automotive manufacturer. And what we do is we manage the movement of the money that follows that physical movement of goods and services. So from our business's perspective, there's really a couple of components to our business. The first is we're a payment platform that actually moves the money. So if I'm that car manufacturer, I've got suppliers all over the world. We move the money from that car manufacturer to all of their suppliers that are on our platform. And those suppliers can log in and they can see all kinds of information about where's my money, when am I going to receive my money, was there any credit memos or offsets or deducts against my invoices. So that's the first thing that we do is we've created a platform that moves the money and gives visibility for all of the suppliers. The second thing that we do is we've created a network of banks that have deployed about $45 billion in credit on our platform in 30 currencies around the world, and they have an interest in purchasing those receivables from those suppliers once the invoice has been approved. So if I'm an axle manufacturer and I send that invoice to the car manufacturer, as soon as it's approved, that invoice shows up on our platform, and as the treasurer or the CFO of that axle manufacturer, I can log in, see all of my invoices that have been approved, and say, I want to sell this invoice or that invoice. Or I can say, I need 50 million euros in my Belgian bank account the second Tuesday of every month to cover payroll the second Thursday of every month. And we will manage the movement of money for them all around the world in whatever currency they need for the invoices that they have available to them. Is that better than when you were 29?
Oh, it's good to me, but I understand it. I'm just really curious how many people out there could say that back, because it is a complicated space, and what you guys do is fascinating, and I really have been in awe of the success over the years. And many of you don't if you think about it, everybody understands credit card here in Atlanta, and it's a big lending space. I think the trade credit space, which is just businesses selling to other businesses on credit, is 1.5 times the size of the entire consumer credit card market. So that was one of the things that, I didn't quite understand that when I first met Billy, but have learned that since.
Yeah, I think you'll hear a lot more. The last several years have been a lot about business to consumer fintech. And within the city of Atlanta, a lot of people don't realize, is probably the number 2 hotspot in the world for financial technology businesses. The number 1 is probably London in the UK. And Atlanta is unbelievably well positioned with all of the payment processors that we have, with the Atlanta Federal Reserve, who has historically cleared all of the US dollar denominated transactions everywhere in the world. And Atlanta is very well positioned with our supply chain experience. You heard from Manhattan Associates last week. The basis that we have in the city for financial technology, for supply chain, is second to none. There's no place like it in the world. And I think one of the things that you'll see in the coming 10 years is a lot of B2B financial technology businesses. The space that we're in is actually significantly larger than global GDP. A lot of people, when you hear that statement, a lot of people wonder, well, how can that possibly be? Global GDP is based on finished goods that go into the market. And if you think about it, everything that's a finished good turns over multiple times within B2B supply chains to be assembled into the car. The car hits the market, and that's going to impact the global supply chain. But the rubber to Michelin to be turned into tires doesn't necessarily hit in the GDP numbers. So the market for B2B lending, B2B trade finance is actually significantly larger than global GDP. It's a massive opportunity that Atlanta is very well positioned to take advantage of.
Yep. So PJ gave me some questions. Let me see what you got here.
This always makes me a little nervous.
So prime revenue.
If I don't like this question, can we have Sagar
This is
come up?
PJ's question. Prime revenue is revered as the best company on the planet. Is that because the CEO is so awesome?
It has nothing to do with the CEO. It's actually because of our board. One of our board members is here, Dennis Lockhart, was kind enough to join our board a few years ago, and it's because we've had phenomenal board members over the years.
I did want to look and see the question. These were from PJ, not that one. I've got a bunch of others, but they're not appropriate. So. Ukraine, what's going, is that having an impact right now in supply chain? I know in my world, can't tell you how many of our developers in our software companies are telling me now that they have developers that are in the Ukraine or were in the, and actually we have a lot in Russia, but so it's been very complicated.
Yeah, I can't wait. I love history. I love to read about history. And a lot of times I'll think about the lens of what's happening in the world through the context of decades. So, I think it's going to be very interesting in a decade or 20 years from now to look back at the time that we're in right now and think about what's happened. But if you look back, if you read about business history, it's almost impossible to find a time in, any of our lives for sure, where there's been one thing after another. So if you think back to March of 2020, the global volume on our platform, which is pretty substantive. We share a lot of data. We've published a lot of data. It's indicative of the economic sort of forecast a quarter or two down the road of what's going to happen within the economy, the economic performance in different regions around the world. And in March, the world came to a grinding halt. Q2 of 2020 was down 35 or 40%. Automotive was down 95% globally on our platform. Just incredible the impact and the things that you needed to do to think about agility and resilience within the supply chains, redeployment of resources. You come out of that and you think, okay, if you remember back then, everybody was thinking 90 days. We're going to push pause on the economy for 90 days. PPP, stimulus, all of that was about, we just need 90 days. We'll get through this in 90 days. We get through 45 days and things look pretty good. People start going back to work and all of a sudden there's new variants. We survive through that. Then a ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal and backs up global trade. Run out of toilet paper again, run out of milk again. People don't necessarily understand what's happening. We actually had clients that shut down their facilities, put all of their employees on sort of temporary leave, get ready to go back, and find out their employees won't come back, right? A lot of people don't realize that happened in the pandemic, and that's one of the big things that hit supply chains. People were ready to open their facilities to process meat, make bacon, make ham, whatever, and they don't have the employees to come back to actually man the factory to be able to redeploy.
Why didn't they come back? Like I keep,
Well,
my wife keeps
I
asking me
think
that, and I don't have a good answer.
the labor market's completely different. That you can't underestimate, sort of the stimulus money that was paid to people. A lot of employees could make more money by not working than they could working. A lot were scared. The labor market went very mobile. And so that we continue to face those challenges today. That has actually helped Ukraine. You get through that. We have another, more variants that are shutting down different parts of the world. At the moment, Hong Kong and China are completely locked down. It's incredibly difficult to do business there. You finally get to the point where it looks like it's going to end, and we actually are in a position where my mind is blown to think about the fact that we have a kinetic ground war on the ground in Europe, in Ukraine. And if you haven't been to Ukraine, it's just like Atlanta, right? This is absolutely no different than us. It's probably the strongest growing emerging economy in all of Europe, not just Eastern Europe. And it is a massive place for software development globally. So we don't have direct employees there. We do have several employees that are Ukrainian and have family members. We have 2 gentlemen that work for us who are 30, 32 years old, and their fathers were cleaners and butchers, and they end up going back and getting an AK-47 at the local library, and they're fighting on the street. You can't imagine the pressure and the stress that puts on a colleague that's sitting right next to you. Our second largest office is in Prague, and that's where those employees work. So there's been that impact, but a lot of the things I think we haven't hit some of the supply chain issues which will come out of Ukraine. Ukraine produces something like 40% of the global supply of pig iron, which goes into buildings, heavy equipment, things like that. Those systems are not as efficient because that iron ore comes out of Russia. It's processed into Ukraine and turned into iron. It's shipped around the world to be able to turn into buildings and bulldozers and things like that. There's more inventory that's in that system, so we haven't necessarily hit that from a supply chain perspective. But when you think about the trade routes, when you think about the sanctions that are occurring, it all is going to have a massive impact on an already, sort of fragile supply chain system. So I think volatility is the watchword for the next 5 or 10 years in supply chain.
Let's see if we have some questions from the audience. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Randall?
I want to know what is your platform telling us is coming a quarter or 2 down the road, if it can kind of see the future.
Yeah, so we actually see a lot of data. So we capture the data. When we onboard, we work with buyers around the world in different sectors. And when we onboard suppliers, we see 100% of the commerce that occurs between those buyers and suppliers. So we have a lot of concentration in industries like automotive, heavy equipment manufacturing, various retail sectors, grocery. We have a big market concentration in grocery in Europe, globally in beer, globally in coffee. So we see a lot of those purchases. And volatility is the watchword. The thing that I would say about what is coming and what will be the case is there's a great deal of volatility. The world is back to where we were, and we're actually higher because of inflation right now in terms of the dollar or euro or GBP purchases globally. But you never know what's around the corner, and something is going to happen. I think the systems and the processes are getting better at being able to redirect inventory within the supply chain, but that's through a Herculean effort of humans. It hasn't really developed into the software world yet, or new business, which I think is an area that Atlanta has a big opportunity to have an impact on. But volatility, if there's one word or one thing that I would forecast, it's going to be volatility for a while. And that shouldn't scare us, because in that change, there's always a great deal of opportunity.
Other questions, Jeff?
Could you give your view on nearshoring and reshoring? I teach about it like, oh, it's easy, but Eddie said it takes a while to reshore if you don't have the factories, et cetera. And I want to advertise Gardner. He took my global business class in his MBA at Emory. I taught him nothing about this. So when he said he's pretty smart, he's very smart.
Yeah, so nearshoring and sort of onshoring, reshoring is going to be a really interesting thing to watch over the next 5 or 10 years. The first thing is if we talk to our clients, and our clients are telling us that like they can't do anything yet. Right now, they're just trying to stay afloat. That it's all hands on deck to make sure that they've got inventory where they need it to be able to continue to run their operations so that they can produce their finished product and save as much of their sales as possible. Who knows when that's going to stabilize? The best guess is it's not going to be 2022. Most of our clients believe, and I believe. If you think about automotive, the global chip shortage that's going on right now, you have to build the factories before you can solve that problem. Those factories aren't even going to come online until next year. But one thing is for sure, they will all re-engineer their supply chains. They need to go through a rationalization. Almost every one of our clients around the world was caught in a situation where they had exposure to a specific supplier that went down. They maybe had a exposure to a port that went down, a country, or even a region. I mean, before March of 2020, no one ever thought that we would lose the entire Southeast Asian region for weeks on end. We always, from the 50s through 2020, we thought we can just go next door and compete. But we can't go next door and compete because the port of Shanghai is shut down, right? You can't process goods. So everyone is thinking about, I have to diversify. I don't think it's going to be a movement away from those regions. I do think that there will be a big diversification, and I need to think about diversification in terms of companies. So there will be more suppliers. There'll be a diversification in terms of region. So I think Africa, South America, Mexico will benefit from that. In terms of onshoring, a lot of people talk about that. We don't have at the moment, we don't have the labor, and we don't seem to have the sort of institutional will within our country to develop the skilled and semi-skilled labor to fill those jobs to bring that manufacturing back, which presents a great opportunity for Georgia Tech and the Atlanta schools to be able to work on automation and projects like that. I think over the next 10 years, you will see massive re-engineering of all of the supply chain processes. It's a great opportunity for our city and for our region.
Let's have one last question. Anybody? Henry?
How have you changed your platform to fight cyber?
So I'm not going to give any specifics. My chief legal officer is here who manages all of our security. But I think it's something that we've always had it's been built into our system. It's something that we monitor very, very carefully. We manage a material amount of money for some of the largest banks in the entire world, and we are a payments platform that moves money all over the world. Cyber is something that's very serious, and I think I have a view that the cyber war is nothing new. The cyber war is something that's been going on for a decade or more. We've been at war with bad actors that are state. They're not just hackers somewhere. They're state actors that are bad actors and that we need to be very aware of. I don't really want to get into a lot of the statistics or the details, but the statistics are increasing on cyber right now. So everybody's talking about a coming cyber war. Financial services, financial technology, critical infrastructure, supply chain, those are all big targets of cyber criminals. And the cyber criminals in Russia and China and Iran and North Korea, they're tightly aligned, and best practices are managed by the state. And so we have to be very aware of that as a country. It's a national security issue. It's not just a business issue, and we need to think about it like a national security issue.
PJ Gardner, thank you so much. What a fascinating program today. And please join us again next week for our final in the series with Griff Lynch and the Georgia Ports Authority. Have a wonderful week.